After talking with ADR director Clifford Chapin and scriptwriter Tyler Walker, it's clear the dub staff have a solid enough understanding of Dr. Stone's appeal. The original manga comes from a platform where some, but not all stories are well known for featuring hyper-real action, and Dr. Stone obviously has some hyper-real stuff too. But what sets it apart is a basis in real-world practical science. Like many shonen, there's a grand end goal for the protagonist, but part of what keeps us engaged is relishing in the smaller victories, and this time we have a more tangible grasp on how huge of a journey this is going to be, and as a result we can get more excited about the science that makes it all happen.
Poured vinegar on burned shells, extracted glacial acetic acid using sulfuric acid, turned it into ketene in an iron pipe, and put it back to make acetic anhydride.
Oh, very interesting.
Granted, the series is able to juggle drama, fun, and self-aware humor to stop that premise from getting stale, but it really is a perpetual cycle of finding materials to make tools that themselves are used to get new materials which are used to make other essential materials, or even using science itself to encourage others to lend their support to the science you can't do on your own. Around every corner, it feels like there's new problems piling up, but instead of frustration or boredom with how menial some tasks seem, I'm still left feeling engaged, because there's science to be found in everything. From food to medicine to weapons to automation to just making people's lives easier, one breakthrough opens up doors to so many others, making these setbacks ironically the perfect frame of reference to portray this sense of progress. The same way a fight scene could be built up with training or personal stakes. It's less a show about learning science, and more about learning why it means so much to people.
Science levels the playing field for everyone!
Tyler Walker has almost 2 decades of experience with anime dubbing, directing fan favorites like Baccano, and writing many other scripts before Dr. Stone. Of course, he and Clifford needed to do research to get the right pronunciation of all the scientific terms and historical figures mentioned in the series, but they also seemed to understand how important it was for the characters to communicate the emotional weight of this information.
I hope you realize what an honor this is. You're getting to witness humanity's revival firsthand.
When I read the manga before the anime aired, the impression I got of Senku was this sarcastic, almost devilish main character that danced the line between being a complete arsehole out for his own ends and a capable hero people could look up to. He was most likely written this way to give those very technical science explanations a bit of punchiness and a bit of humor.
So what kind of girls do you like?
The kind that can pump a ton of oxygen into my furnace.
What kind of answer is that?
Clifford said they unfortunately couldn't fit auditions into the production schedule, so he considered several factors when precasting Senku, including the seiyu's voice, Senku's age, and his confident yet casual personality. So imagine how surprised that the actor he thought could do this cunning character justice was none other than sweet little Alphonse from the original FMA all those years ago.
Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain, something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange.
E equals mc squared. Energy and mass have equivalent exchange. Old man Einstein expressed a basic scientific truth with that equation. It tells us that we can't create energy from nothing.
Now Aaron Dismuke has shared other roles with Senku's seiyu Yusuke Kobayashi, those being Arslan from the series of the same name and Yu from Fuuka. While he doesn't quite have the same loud theatrical side that Kobayashi does for the character, I think Aaron gets that balance of being playful yet charismatic in a way that doesn't come off as condescending, altering his pitch appropriately.
I'm the kind of guy who absolutely loves technology. I get excited by space and mechs and Doraemon and stuff like that. I'm going to use the awesome power of science to rescue every last person.
Oh yeah? Then why don't you come along with me?
Felicia Angel performs Kohaku with a very natural-sounding pace, giving off a confident presence. Although in retrospect, maybe her voice doesn't have as much of a contrast with Ruri's gentle demeanor to portray her as a stereotypical tomboy, at least compared to the Japanese.
That's super forbidden love! Obviously not.
Justin Briner is hilarious as Ginro, especially when you consider it's the exact opposite type of character he's currently best known for.
Raccoon poop.
Poop!
And of course, Kenny Green is amazing for whichever elderly character he portrays.
ever since you showed up, it's been a hell of a lot harder, that's for sure. But more importantly, it's been a hell of a lot more fun.
It's probably convenient that Hyoga's mouth is covered, so the staff don't need to be as precise with the timing of his dialogue. But Jerry Jewell was a nice choice regardless, making the character sound proper, yet unsettling.
You did a proper job. You filled the role of filthy turncoat quite well.
Magma and his underling Mantle do well at displaying a dynamic similar to Gaston and LeFou from Disney's Beauty and the Beast. In fact, Tsukasa looks a bit like Tarzan, and he mentions his sister wanted a seashell necklace because she liked the Little Mermaid. And everyone getting turned to stone is like what happened in Sleeping Beauty. And there's a character later in the manga who kinda looks like Jafar.
Yuzuriha does not have a dick!
Riko Fajardo brings similar levels of energy to Taiju as he did with Tatsumi in Zombieland Saga, and Mirio in My Hero Academia.
Power!
In Japanese, Taiju is played by Makoto Furukawa, the voice of Saitama in One Punch Man. So it's really important that they match the insanity and enthusiasm in his shouting. With all that said, I get that some fans will prefer the original voices, as they are all fantastic, and the dub has the occasional awkward line.
Get in my belly!
But in terms of overall adaptation, it's not just the sound of the dialogue that's important, but the nuance in the script. Tyler and Clifford both mentioned they actively compared the translation provided in the subtitled version against the official manga localization by Caleb Cook, to help best assess what exactly the characters are trying to express in English, comparing the two versions that already exist and going for whatever fits best, whether it be one or the other, both, or neither. Both the dub and sub preserve Senku's signature quips like Big Oaf, 1mm, and 10 billion%, but his catchphrase, Sosoruze korewa, is played with a bit more loosely. In the manga, this was adapted as Get Excited, but the official subtitles on Crunchyroll have it as This is exhilarating, so the dub includes both, sometimes one after the other if the lip flaps allow.
This is exhilarating. Get excited.
In fact, they've actually been able to preserve some details from the manga translation that are missing in the Crunchyroll subtitles.
刀とか作っちゃう？発電所。発電所 G まで行っちゃってんの？
Watching this by itself, it doesn't seem too out of the ordinary. The subtitle makes sense given the context, but if you've read the manga, you'll be familiar with Gen's quirk of saying certain words in Pig Latin. According to Caleb, this is because in the Japanese version he inverts the syllables of certain words, such as turning maji, which means are you serious, into jima, which is a kind of Japanese equivalent to Pig Latin. Initially, the dub didn't catch this detail when the episode debuted on the streaming platform. However, for the Toonami broadcast of Gen's introduction, they were able to re-record it, and have been using the Pig Latin since.
Will that be enough to start a fire, though? I underway.
That's absolutely AZ Cray.
This is arable tay, not airfay. I can only hold it 1 minute.
It's interesting that the dub seems to preserve more of these character quirks than the official subtitles, since so many in the community expect the inverse, suggesting this is more of a case-by-case basis, depending on the ADR staff involved and their circumstances. So far, one of the most involved examples of recurring phrase adaptation is Chrome's signature word, one he says all the time in all kinds of situations.
Yabe! 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 Yabe!
The word seems to be some sort of Japanese slang, and the main problem with adapting it is all the different things he uses it for.
Yabe!
It behaves sometimes as an interjection and an adjective. It carries positive connotations sometimes, but negative connotations other times. And sometimes it can be used to just demonstrate shock or surprise. Chrome will cheer for Senku's cause using the word in one scene, but he'll also say it while potentially falling to his death. At times, the show will also have other characters say it for a comedic beat, to maybe imply that his habit and enthusiasm is catching on. But the Crunchyroll subtitles don't really indicate this. The intensity of the word seems to take different forms given the context, running the gamut of damn, insane, yo, crazy, crap, oh man, etc. And honestly, this does make for natural and contextually appropriate subtitling, but neglecting the repetition itself doesn't bring out that side of the character as clearly as the manga does. Caleb Cook decided to adapt the catchphrase as BAAAD, often spelling it with multiple A's for specific emphasis. Yeah, that's right, if you made it this far and still thought I was gonna shit talk this dub because of the title, you were wrong. And the best part is, this technically isn't even clickbait. Since yabe is slang similar to yabai, it can be argued that the Western equivalent would be something like, whoa, that's sick, or dude, or dang. And the word bad does fit the bill in that slang way. That's bad! It does sound a little weird out of context, but I think Matt Shipman's delivery of the word in the dub is distinct enough to tell that he's usually using it in that radical slang sense.
I have something that you just don't. Holy crap, Kinro! This is bad!
Underestimated trust in the power of science.
Holy crap, Kinro! This is bad!
It's worth noting that the dub doesn't actually use the word bad for every instance of yabe in the Japanese, as it will sometimes modify it to the context as the Crunchyroll subs do. I do wish the dub could have been as consistent as the manga, but compared to the subs, I think the characters display their quirks enough times to establish them as consistent elements of their normal, everyday speech. Plus, I don't think moments like this would have sounded as funny as the Japanese audio if they kept it as bad 100% of the time.
Oh shit!
All of this is cool and helps bring the substance of the Japanese dialogue into English, but not everything in that regard is so straightforward. The goal of anime dubbing is to create an understanding for non-Japanese viewers, and part of that involves just not interfering with things that said viewers can understand on their own. However, while aspects of Japanese popular culture like video games come across fine and dandy, traditional culture is harder. I imagine not many Westerners would get this, but it is one of the oldest Japanese folktales, beginning with a giant peach floating down a river with baby Momotaro inside it. The word Donburako refers to the peach bobbing up and down in the water, and Suika wearing a watermelon mask is what invited the reference to the story to begin with. The villagers only know a skewed version of the folktale anyway. However, the actual in-story reason for why that's the case comes with its own hurdles. It's later revealed that these villages are descended from the handful of humans that avoided the petrification. For the next 3,000 years, the following generations had managed to survive, due to those ancestors making it a tradition to pass down stories, including those altered folktales. Not only did these stories teach the villagers survival tactics, but they also seemed to influence their language, which explains their knowledge of words like gorilla despite never having met one in real life.
My sister must have told me hundreds of stories when we were growing up together. And she loves big words. I suppose that means I got all my bigger words from Ruri.
This was actually foreshadowed before we even arrive at the village in this scene, where in the original Japanese audio, Kohaku counts numbers in English.
3.
Contrasting Senku, who's been counting in Japanese.
1、2、3、4、5、6、7.
There's no good way to adapt this when dubbing the show's base language into English itself, but Clifford also said he directed the actors to say characters' names in specific ways in order to compensate for that.
The strongest primate high schooler, Shishio Tsukasa.
The Dr. Stone dub makes use of Japanese name order, which is something you don't often hear in dubs nowadays, but it seems to be used by the depetrified Japanese characters to highlight that linguistic root. The villagers usually only say first names, as the concept of surnames is unknown to all of them but Ruri.
Your full name is Ishigami Senku.
The Old Worlders also seem to consistently use a strict Japanese pronunciation for each other's names, such as flipped R sounds. I'm not sure everyone will see it as an equally effective answer to the Japanese, but regardless, it speaks to the importance of staying ahead of the curve so you're prepared for future challenges, which is exactly what's happening. In episode 16, we flash back to the astronauts who avoided the petrification from space, and issue number 1 is that they're from disparate parts of the world. According to Caleb, we could assume they were speaking to each other in Russian, as learning Russian is required for launching from that specific spaceport.
Welcome, friends, to the International Space Station!
Yes, we're glad to have you.
The authenticity of these accents can be pretty hit or miss. But then there's Lillian Weinberg, an American singer who was brought along for the ride.
I spent $50 million to buy a ride on the Soyuz. I'm one of the first space tourists in history, not to mention a certified international celebrity.
It might sound arbitrary to hear Caitlin Glass give this character a southern drawl, but that is her confirmed accent as per the manga. Something that was revealed 30 chapters after this character was introduced. This is one of the many potential issues between the two mediums that can cause problems without the right foresight, since the sound of voices or accents doesn't literally exist in manga. It's stupidly fortunate that this reveal came in the manga before episode 16 needed to be dubbed, but it speaks to the integrity of the ADR team that they take the overarching details of the story seriously so that there aren't inconsistencies later down the line. You know, other than the apparent curveball that the Japanese production crew chose a singer with an English accent instead.
I'll be thinking of the same thing I always do.
Then again, some singers might repress their accents during performances, but only time will tell how the nuance of the accent will be handled in the anime once it becomes an unambiguous plot point. And that's not even mentioning that several of the Japanese characters canonically understand and speak English too. When the anime continues, there's gonna be new catchphrases, new interesting characters, new linguistic and vocal challenges to address. The job is far from over, but as we've seen from the story itself, the accumulation of knowledge never stops.
There are rules behind everything that happens. Science is just the name for the steady, pain-in-the-ass effort that goes into finding out what they are.
The characters of Dr. Stone have gone from turning seashells into soap to rediscovering electricity and modern medicine, finding workarounds and celebrating smaller victories that contribute to even larger goals, and even those goals will come together to form even bigger ones. Everything from cotton candy to even just a single song are parts of the whole. The process can connect people across time as we build on what came before, and even the uncertain future can become more clear through the strides we make now. A lot of what we've talked about today sounds like no-brainer decisions. Of course, research and consultation is important when trying to bring a Japanese story into English. This isn't the only dub that's benefited from these things, and it's not without some flaws. But it's nice to remember that it isn't just about knowing the story and character details, it's about understanding them, making connections, and using them to pave the way forward. Obviously, we can't tell where that'll lead in the end yet, but based on the groundwork that's been laid so far, we're confident the Dr. Stone dub is in bad hands. Big thank you again to Clifford Chapin and Tyler Walker for answering our questions about the dub, as well as Aaron Dismuke for looking over the script. Let us know your thoughts on the Dr. Stone localization in the comments below. Thanks to Mr. Nice Guy for helping edit some parts of this video. And big thanks to all our patrons currently supporting us, including Reagan Senpai, Ryan Rodriguez, Seth Phillips, Marissa Lenti, JR Pictures, Spartacus, and Unknown Secret 1000. This has been the Cartoon Cipher, and until next time.
Now slap it.